Hello and welcome to 10forums.com. In this video I'm going to look at how to configure a Windows 10 computer as a dedicated shared PC for guest use. This video is about something which Microsoft calls shared PC mode, so I thought I'd do a little bit of a demonstration of what that looks like when it's enabled. Initially we start with something that looks like a fairly familiar Windows 10 login screen, but if I click to log in, you see we have other user as an option, which invites us to type a username in. If we look at sign in options, we can see that username can either be a local or domain account, or it can be a Microsoft account. Then we have this new option called guest. So let's click on sign in and see what that does. I've speeded this up a little bit, but it does take a little while because what it's doing is creating a new profile for us to log into Windows with. At first sight, it looks like an ordinary Windows desktop. So let's go into File Explorer and see what we can find there. So under this PC, you see we've got downloads and a CD drive and not much else. So what else can we do? We can right click the Windows button and we get a run box, and that lets us open the run dialog and run Notepad from there. So it's not completely locked down. Now if we try and save this though, you see again downloads in the CD drive. What happens if we type C users in? We can't open that. Your school has blocked it. But we did see a folder name there, so let's try that. And this is the folder name of this guest profile, which has been generated automatically when we signed in as guest. And we can get to, through this, the downloads folder which we saw earlier. And we can save the file with a name, and that's saved. And if we go back into File Explorer, you can see that file is now saved in the downloads folder. So the next thing I thought I'd try is to log out and then log in again as a guest and see what that looks like. So as before, I'm going to click on the guest option and then click on sign in. So as before, first thing I'm going to do is open File Explorer. As before, we have downloads in the CD drive. You notice we can't see the file we saved in downloads because this is a different guest, so you can't have access to the previous guest's files. Again, we're going to look into Notepad. And we're going to try and save the file in the same way as before. We're going to type C users into there. Now you see there's two different profiles. So you see the name starts with SHPC, which I assume stands for shared PC. We have the one ending in E, which was the earlier one, and we have the one ending in F, which is the one we just created. If I try and access the one ending in E, it won't let me access it because I'm a different guest, and therefore I can't see that user's file. I haven't got permission to do it. If I change the path to go to the profile name ending in F, which is for this user, and go to downloads, then I should be able to save the file with a random name as before. So what else can we do as a guest? What about PowerShell as admin? Is that going to work? No, it's been blocked by your system administrator, and there's not even a user account window to try and get access with the password. But what we can do is run PowerShell with ordinary non-admin rights. Once in PowerShell, it looks like the normal things you'd be able to do as a standard user. You can change directory. You can see the file that we saved from Notepad. I'll then try and move up a directory and then try and access the user profile of the other account, the earlier guest, to see if that'll let me in, which it won't. So it's pretty much as you'd expect. The key thing for me here is it's not a locked down PC with lots of restrictions. You can pretty much do most of the things you could as a normal user. The restrictions on File Explorer don't seem to actually apply into PowerShell or a command prompt. So what is shared PC mode? Well, from Windows 10 version 16.07 onwards, it's been possible to use this mode to configure a PC for shared or guest usage for the Pro, Education and Enterprise versions of Windows. I've put Windows 10 S in brackets. That's recently appeared at the time I'm making this video, and I did see something which suggested that this also supports this mode. which makes some sense because Windows 10S is restricted in the software it can run, which fits quite well with the idea of a guest PC. However, in this mode, it allows multiple guest users to sign onto the machine with some restrictions on what they can access, and then old guest accounts will automatically be deleted by maintenance processes later. To set this up, we use Windows Configuration Designer in Windows version 17.03. There are some restrictions. This does not work with Windows 10 Home, and I think to get best results the machine should be dedicated for use as a shared PC. Once you've installed this configuration change, there's no easy way back, so I would strongly recommend that you have a backup image of the computer before you start applying the change. The steps we're going to follow are to download with the Windows Configuration Designer, use that to create a provisioning package, apply that provisioning package, and then sign out, and from then onwards this PC will be in shared PC mode. To do this, ideally you would want a computer that you're dedicating to be used as a shared PC. Because the configuration changes apply to all users of the computer, it's much easier if you're not trying to use that computer for something else. And that computer must be using Windows 10 Pro, Education or Enterprise, or perhaps Windows 10S as I said earlier. Ideally you'd have a second computer, a technician computer, which you'd use to prepare the provisioning package to run on this, but that's not absolutely essential. So let's get going and set this up. The first thing I'm going to do is to install Windows Configuration Designer, which is part of the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit, which you can find at the link I've shown here. And then we're going to install Configuration Designer. Okay, I'm in Firefox and I'm going to search for Download Windows 10 ADK, put that into the search box, and then that's the correct link, so I'll click on that. And then we have the option to either download the 1703 ADK or the one for Windows 10 version 1607. Now for this I want the latest one, which is 1703 at the moment. We download an ADK setup.exe file. I'm going to right click ADK setup.exe and then select the option to run as administrator and say yes to the user account control message. Now I can either choose to install it or part of it or download the whole thing. Now it's quite big, 4.4 gigabytes, and this time I just want to install parts of it. Then there's a question about whether you want usage data to go to Microsoft, and then the license agreement, which you should read and then choose whether you want to accept it. Now various features have their checkboxes selected. Actually we don't want to install most of these, so I'm going to untick almost all of them. Then the one I am going to tick is called Configuration Designer, and you see that's quite a small download, and that's all we need for this, so I'm going to install just that component. So we're now going to use Windows Configuration Designer to create a desktop project. Within that we select the option to provision desktop devices, we then configure devices for shared use, then we switch to the advanced editor and we're going to configure some of the options, save the project and then export a provisioning package. The first thing I'm going to do is start Windows Configuration Designer. Now for me it's in my recently added list, but if you want to find it, scroll down and look for Windows Kits, and then within there it's an option, Windows Imaging and Configuration Designer. On the initial screen of this there are a number of options which are for project templates if you like, and I'm going to use the Provision Desktop Devices template. I'm going to give this a name and then put in a short description of what we want to do, which is going to be a shared PC. And we arrive at a sort of template of steps to do to set up a desktop device. Now most of these we don't want to do here. These are typically for setting up a brand new device, and what we want to do is change an existing one. But we do set configure devices to shared use to yes. There's also an interesting option further down called remove pre-installed software, which I might try one day. Then I want to switch to the advanced editor. When I click this I get a dialog box telling me that I can't come back to this screen if I say yes, but I do want to say yes, so I click that. And we arrive at the more advanced editor screen. On the left hand side is all the available customizations. Now because I downloaded the smaller version of this, I've only got runtime settings available to me. And on the right hand side are the options that have been set by choosing that shared PC option. So it's put quite a few options in there. So let's look through some of those options. I'm going to start with policies. So looking under policies, there's something there about security. Now this is quite an important one because this is the thing that determines whether you can reverse this. If you click allow remove provisioning package, and if you were to select yes to being allowed to remove it, then that makes this step reversible. You can go back in as administrator and take this setting away. But the default is no, and I'm going to change that back to no. But the impact of this is that when I apply this provisioning package, there is no way back. So before I did apply this, I'd want to make sure I had a good backup of the PC. The next thing I'm going to look at is update. Now the reason for this is because this PC will be perhaps unattended and used by lots of different people, you want to make sure that it's going to update itself with security updates and patches when they come out. So there's various settings there that you might want to look at to make sure that that's going to update itself at the right time. In application management, there is a setting which lets us restrict which apps are allowed to run. So there's a setting there called allow all trusted apps, and that's set to no at the moment. I'm not totally sure how well that works, but it's certainly a setting you might want to consider setting. By default it's set to no. You might remember from the little demonstration I did earlier that every time a guest logs in, it creates a new Windows user profile with a name that's formulaic with letters that keep incrementing every time the new profile is created. Now each of these profiles takes up disk space, so we need maintenance processes to delete some of the old guest profiles to stop the disk getting too full. Now you can also have domain users using this PC as well as guests. The behaviour there is slightly different because they might want to be able to get back to their user profiles, which are identifiably theirs, so they can come back to the old one later on. Now there are various settings around the thresholds which start these deletion processes, and there are also some power settings. Now by default these are set to ensure that maintenance can run regularly, for instance by making sure that it will sleep rather than doing a shutdown or hibernate. And there are also some education policies which are more education friendly. Again, those are on by default. Now I'm not going to go through those two things in any detail, but it's worth a look at the Microsoft guidance, where the link is the link shown here, to see how these work. So we're going back to the settings screen. We're going to look at the shared PC settings. And the first one of those is the major one, which says enable shared PC mode, which is set to true. And that's what drives a lot of this behaviour. Then we can look at the account model. Now in this case we're enabled to have both domain joined users and guest users. The domain joined users log in with their own login ID and password. Now the deletion policy, I'm going to change that to delete at either the disk space threshold or an inactive time threshold. Now we're going to look at the levels, or when the deletion starts. So I'm going to stop deleting accounts when there's 50% free disk space. I'm going to start deleting accounts when it's down to 25% disk space free. I'm also going to change the inactive threshold, which is the number of days before which it will start deleting old accounts, and I'm going to set that to 30. So any account which hasn't been used for 30 days will be deleted. Looking a bit further down this screen, we can see that there is a setting called set edu policies to true and set power policies to true. These mean that it will be education friendly and also use the power settings to make sure that the PC doesn't hibernate, for instance. And I'm also going to set restrict local storage to true to stop people from accessing the local disk on the device. And those are all the settings I want to change. I didn't actually change very much there. A lot of it was just looking at the settings that were available to us. So now we're going to save the project, and then we should create our provisioning package. When I save it, it gives me a warning that there might be sensitive information in there. So for instance, I could have put a product key in or a user password. I didn't do that. Now I'm going to export the provisioning package. I'm going to say I'm an IT admin when doing that, just to give it a label of what the owner is. I'm not going to set a certificate or encrypt it, because again there's nothing particularly sensitive in there. Then we're going to pick a location to save the provisioning package. In the real world, you'd probably want to do this onto a USB device or something which is on a different PC. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm actually going to install the provisioning package on this PC itself. Generally, you wouldn't do this. Generally, you'd set this up on a technician PC, copy it on a drive to another PC, and then apply the provisioning package in another PC. So I build the provisioning package, and then it's created it. It doesn't take very long at all. I'm going to look in File Explorer to see where the provisioning package is being created. I had an earlier go at this, so there's a couple in the same folder. The provisioning package is the .ppkg file. So now we're going to actually apply this provisioning package and see what happens. Now, because of the way I've done this, this will permanently change the configuration of the machine, because I set the provisioning package so it can't be removed. And it can't be removed by anyone, not even the admin or any user of the PC. So before you would do this, in the real world, you'd make sure you had a backup image so you could revert later if you needed to. And then what I'm going to do is locate the provisioning package and then open it. And then we're going to sign out and then see how that's changed the behaviour of the computer. As I said before, I'm doing this in an unusual way because I'm doing it on the computer where I created the provisioning package. Normally, you'd want to do it on another computer. However, note that before you do this, you also want to make sure that any applications that you want users to run are already installed in any place before you install the provisioning package. So all we need to do is right click on the provisioning package file, the ppkg file, and then open it. I think you could also double click it as well. I think that would work the same way. Then after a little while we should get the user account control dialog box, and because I'm an administrator I can click yes to run this provisioning package. Then there's another message that pops up which will describe what the provisioning package is going to do and ask if it's a source that I trust, and it is, so I'm going to say yes, I'm going to add it. And then nothing seems to happen. However, I think it has actually worked. So we're going to check something to see if we can see what's happened. So I'm going to go into settings, and then within settings there are some settings for work. So accounts, and then within that we should be able to look at the settings for access work or school. Within that there's a section about provisioning packages. Now if I select add or remove a provisioning package, we can see that there is now a provisioning package with the date I created it. You can also see that we can't remove it. So even though I'm logged in as administrator, I can't remove it. I can look at the details, which aren't very exciting, but I can't now remove this provisioning package. We're stuck with it. Another effect is that if I was to click on the C drive and try and navigate there, it says I can't do it. My school has blocked it. So the settings are already starting to take effect. The next thing I'm going to do is sign out. And then when we come back to the Windows login screen, you can see that we have the layout with the guest option and other user as the options to log in with. And I'm going to log back in as a guest and look at a couple of other things and how it behaves. So I'm going to start up the Firefox browser, and we get the usual questions that you have the first time you use a browser. Now I'm going to try and download the Chrome browser to see how that will behave, to see if the rules about allowing or not allowing apps to run have any effect. So it does allow us to download the setup file, and then I'm going to navigate to the folder it's downloaded and see if I can run that. So I'm going to double click the Chrome setup item and see what happens. So Google Chrome has worked out that it's not going to be allowed to run as administrator So it's asking if we want to install it without administrator privileges. So we click on that, and then the installation does actually proceed. So whatever restrictions this shared PC mode applies, it doesn't stop you from using the Chrome browser. So let's try something else. Let's try downloading VLC Player. And again, I'm going to download the installer and then try and run it and see what happens. So again, I'm going to try and run the installer that I downloaded. This time I get a message saying it's blocked, and there's no way around that I can see. You'll remember there was something about the way the power settings are set, so I thought I'd see how that's taken effect. So I go into settings, I'm going to search for power settings, and you can see that I can't change that. It says some settings are hidden or managed by your organisation. That's the effect of the provisioning package. If we go into additional power settings, it just blocks it. It just says your school has blocked it. And the last thing I thought I'd try was to go into Edge and see what happens if I try and search for something which might be questionable in a school environment. So I'm going to search for adult movies in the search box to see what happens. And you can see that it's blocked it. So safe search settings have been set to stop me searching for that sort of thing. And while this isn't foolproof, and it may not even be something you want to use in a school environment, this sort of thing is probably a sensible thing to have on a shared PC that guests are going to be using. And that's it. One thing I would say is that the actual setting up of the shared PC doesn't take very long at all, but I hope it's been useful for you to see some of the effects of how it works when it's been set up, and also look at some of the settings and some of the reasons for those settings that you might want to change. I hope that's useful. Thank you for watching.